I see you found our little hiding spot in the universe. Don't get too comfortable. This is a place where you will find those with an experience that's out of this world, or possibly deep within your life. I welcome you to the Oracles with James Tyson. Lean forward and listen. We will pull you into a supernatural journey with guests from around the world, each one experiencing some of the most extraordinary phenomena this wee planet has to offer. Now, here are the Oracles with James Tyson.
Thank you, Liam, and thank you, listener, for tuning in to today's episode of the Oracles with James Tyson. It's me, James, and today I'm going to bounce you over to Ohio and meet a friend of mine, Nathaniel J. Gillis. Nate's an author, lecturer, and religious demonologist. Now, after being in the deliverance ministry, which is the part of the ministry that performs rituals and practices to cleanse people of demons and evil spirits, he felt called to bring his gifts and research to a more secular venue. The experience he had as a child when he was living in a haunted house inspired him to research the fields of demonology and the paranormal. In addition to such disciplines, Nathaniel is also the founder of Preternatural Epiphenomenal Philosophy, which I'm sure he just picked because it was really hard for me to say. Now, it's a belief that demonology is not the study of new life, but the study of old life, but in a new way. So what we're going to be talking about is the history of demons going back in time and how they've kind of popped up in biblical texts over the centuries. We're also going to touch a bit on something called the Dybbuk. We are going to get into what a demon is, talk about possession, manifesting a little bit, but not a lot. Actually, we probably didn't talk about exorcism very much at all, but we are going to talk about the philosophy behind all the different types of work that he's been doing and research over the years of him bouncing around the demonology side of things. He is a writer. He is got a book out. It's called A Moment Called Man. His new book coming out in before the end of the summer here is going to touch on a lot of what we talked about into the demonology side of things. And we're actually going to have him back on once his book's out, and it's going to be a bit of a mind blower. He didn't get really into too much of what is in his new book, but it's off air. He kind of told me what it was, and you're going to really, really like it when it pops out. So we talk about life, death, ghosts, negative beings, the negative ghosts that, basically are what we decide are going to be demons. All those crappy things that go bump in the night and the way they affect us as the living humans and maybe why they pop in. We're going to touch on incubus and succubus too, which is very fascinating, having sex with a ghost. Yeah. It's going to be fun. So I'm going to go open the door here and invite our friend Nate in from Ohio. Again, this is Nathaniel J. Gillis. Check out his website, njgillis.com. That's njgillis.com. And we'll see what he has to say. Nate, how are you today?
Doing good, sir. How are you doing?
I am doing well here on the Pacific coast of Canada, way up in the middle of nowhere. Well, it is the middle of somewhere, but it's not from where you are. It's on the other side of the friggin' continent from you. How's everything? How are you guys doing with the apocalypse down there?
Man, I really don't know. It's a crapshoot, man. I mean, we'll see what's going to happen. They could very well lock us down again, which I don't know what it's going to do for the economy. I don't know what to expect. At this point, I mean, the only thing that could top 2020 is an alien invasion.
That's 2022. Don't worry about that.
There we go. It's already in the book.
I found that it was just, I was telling people to get out in that little less than 90-day period of a lockdown here was, get outside, go for a walk. The air hasn't been this clean for 100 years.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's like wildlife was bouncing through town. We had deer in the backyard. So, okay, it didn't take long. Who says we don't have an effect on our environment?
Exactly right.
Yeah, it was wild. So you're a demonologist.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me,
yes, sir.
Nate, what's a demon?
Well, in my research, I have concluded, at where I'm right now in my research, I believe that the data sample speaks of a demon being a disincarnate spirit, not being a fallen angel. Not that fallen angels don't exist, they do. But even the earliest theologians believed that the demons that we deal with in modernity were the offspring, the actual ghosts of the offspring of fallen angels. And so I've kind of taken that theory and I went a little bit further than many have, and can almost 99.9% prove that we are dealing with that aspect of the afterlife, demons being the disincarnate spirits of evil people.
Okay, but the evil people particularly were the fallen angels.
Well,
or is that, sorry, did I get
No, you're good. No, you're good. There's many different theories out there. The first theory is that demons are fallen angels in and of themselves. The second one is from Genesis 6, which is that they are the dead disincarnate spirits of the Nephilim, which is the progeny of the fallen angels.
Okay,
so,
right.
Yeah, so what I've done is in my research, I looked at that and I said, wait a minute, since when did demons, possessing demons, become ghosts? And where did that originate from? And in my research, I found out that was a prevalent belief throughout Mesopotamia. It predated Judaism, even any Abrahamic religion, by thousands of years. And so that made sense as to why their demonology changed through the evolution of Hebrew consciousness. And so what I came to conclusion of was, I believe that these are not just the progeny of fallen angels, but demonology is essentially the study of the afterlife. That's what we're dealing with, at least in my work. And so that's why I've come to the conclusion that demons are, in fact, disincarnate spirits, who many of them are operating within their own belief systems, with their own memories and values. And that's where I've kind of couched my work at this point.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a game changer. It can be.
Well, it can be, because we talked off air a bit. I did paranormal investigations and, seen dead people and talked to dead people. And there are a number of reasons why people don't cross over. But if you get into the Nephilim and things like that, well, they're not crossing over because they know what could happen on the other side, or they perceive they know what happens if they actually cross, so they stay in that in-between state and just
exactly that is 100% true. And like when I look at these texts that explain how Yahweh cursed them and cursed the angels and then cursed humanity, he cursed them in a very interesting way. First of all, he imprisoned the angels, and then second of all, he says that these entities, they'll become the ghosts. They'll become the ghosts that possess people. But what I think has happened was that he actually introduced a new judgment into this world. And the judgment was essentially any man who's evil, any woman who's evil. They will be like, not just people who are, not the average form of evil, but I'm talking about malevolent evil, people that kill people, people that rape people, the most evil amongst us.
The bad evil.
Yes, sir. The malevolent, possessing evil. Those people are cursed to wonder. And I think that was what he had introduced into the world. And, let me back up here, man. When I got into this research, I got into it from the lens of Christianity. And so my tradition was formulated within my local church. But when I began to encounter these entities in homes, and even before that in my deliverance ministry in church, it didn't take long for me to ask seriously, important questions like, if these are fallen angels, then why does it seem that they're biblically illiterate? Right? These are very important, profound inquiries into this field. If they're fallen angels, then why does it seem like they're actually living in memory and motion, where their belief system is limited to even one microcosm of time and history? Why is it that before Mariolatry existed in the world, that there were no hauntings where any statue of Mother Mary, before she was worshipped, was defaced? Why? Because we're dealing with entities that are only knowledgeable concerning at least religion, many of them, concerning, well, I'm going to say this, they're only knowledgeable about the area of history that they existed in.
Yes.
And so they're going to fight against whatever religion they're aware of. Because if we're dealing with eternal entities, eternal beings that have an all, not even just an all-knowing, but at least knowing more than the average human being does, then why do they have a language preference? A language preference that isn't the language preference of the priest, the pauper, or the preacher. None of this fits the blueprint of a fallen angel. And I mean, there's a lot of theological issues in there anyway. To a rabbi, there is no fallen angel. If it's an angel, it's not fallen. If it's fallen, it's not an angel. So there's a lot of problematic issues with this theory. And we can even just step away from the theological aspect. They can go to the data sample. Data sample, I mean, it just doesn't interpret it like that. It doesn't fit into that blueprint. And so I had to look at myself, and I even spoke to my dad and a couple other mentors that I had in ministry. I said, look, guys, if my blueprint doesn't fit this, if there are things that are happening that doesn't fit my demonology, then I am intellectually obligated to scrap my blueprint and go off of the pure science of this, in a sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean, yeah, so that's what I had to do, and it's really added a lot to my research. And I'm no longer trying to fit things into something that it was never meant to fit into.
Yeah, that's the important part, trying not to jam that round peg into the square hole that you've been given all your life.
Yeah.
Because this is anything to do with what I hate this term, actually, paranormal. This look into life after death.
Right.
And what people all over the world have been seeing for years, and what's been a little more easy to say out loud now in the last 10 or 15 years as a result of these television series coming out. At least, people are not afraid to say, yeah, I see shadows in my house, or I saw grandfather walk by, or I see there's this guy pushing a wheelbarrow past my house every day at 5 o'clock and he's got no legs, that kind of thing. Yeah. People are now saying it out loud. So it's not like this stuff is just all of a sudden coming to the forefront. It's always been there. It's just that we're hearing it a little bit more. So in your investigative studies and your research, you have access to a lot of not only the historic documentation of this type of activity that you're gathering, but you can also have a little more access to, hey, I think I saw something like that the other day.
Exactly.
I'm in your neighborhood. Why don't you come in and tell me about it? So it's good in that way. It's better than it was 50 years ago when somebody had an interest in this. It was kind of hard to get somebody to admit they may have a haunted house. And then you didn't want to write it down, and you may not have wanted to share it with your colleagues. So you've got this wonderful advantage where you have this petri dish that's expanding all around you, and you can go out and experiment with this. Nate, this is kind of cool, dude. Like, yeah,
I'm a candy store, I mean, I can go out into the field, and then I can go back to my literature, and that's the best way, I think, to research. It's not just, downloading an app on the phone and going in somewhere and saying hello, right? It has to be a balance to it. Yeah. You can do the apps, you can do all of, the K2 meters, all that. In addition to that, maybe sit down and say, okay, but what did the ancients believe? Because when I started to look into what I call the pathology, especially of these possessing entities, it was easy to see that they were operating off of an ancient belief system. Their religious creed was not modern. The way that they would operate in homes, the rituals that they would perform, the melting of fingertips and feet and breaking the noses of statues, and all of this speaks to an ancient belief system. And it would make sense to me that our ante or prehistory would point to the fact that these entities came a long time ago. And if that, not just in being, but in belief systems. So that would make sense to me that, okay, even if there were people who were proponent of Genesis 6, if that is true, then why not study what their worldview was at that time and not just, modernity? But yeah, so that's what really led me into this field, and really it just encouraged me and inspired me in ways that I can't even articulate. That these entities, some of them I do believe are ancient, especially if they're ghosts. But I believe that the belief system they're operating off of is ancient. It's primordial. It's prehistory. And I'm going to use a big word here, but it's antediluvian, which means it was before the deluge. So if we're going to understand the world that these entities exist in and the way their worldview is framed, we have to go back to Mesopotamia. We have to not just look at the Mesopotamians and Sumer and what they believed in terms of their gods, but not just what they had faith in, but what they feared. And more often than not, they didn't fear horns and hooves. They feared the dead. They feared ghosts. And what's interesting is they called them hungry ghosts. And it's a fascinating aspect of this field.
Yeah, and if anybody's wondering, we mentioned Genesis 6. That's actually talks about the flood, and
yep,
that's the
yes, sir. The deluge and all that stuff.
Yes, one of the things that I find fascinating about any type of demonology, or actually I should get into negative. We'll call them in this case negative dead people. I've run into that. I've run into just dicks that were idiots in life, and they didn't change, and they're not going to leave because we've actually you don't know this about me, but I actually, with a psychic friend, we cross people over. Okay. And the 4 reasons we find people stay is that one is their children, and they're literally stranger danger. They're going to wait for mom and dad. They're not going with some person they don't know, so they hang out. The other one is people think they still have stuff to do. So they're going to hang around, and they got to keep working, like nurses in hospitals, that kind of thing. Other ones, they don't know they're dead. That's kind of rare unless it's war or a really quick accident. And the other ones are, they have a religious belief that, I'm going to go to a bad place. So I coveted my neighbor's wife. That's a bad one. I'm going to go to hell. And those are the ones we find easier to cross over, because if they have a spark of religious belief in them, one of the things we say to them, if Jesus died for your sins, why would you still be punished? And all they have to do is take that ghostly breath going, what? And all I have to do is think about it. That split second of a thought. And as soon as that happens, usually a friend or a family member comes through and says, no, they're right, you can come. And they leave. Yeah. Yeah. And then they go and they do their thing. But all we had, if they say, no, I'm not going and we had this fellow he died of natural causes in prison. He got sentenced to murder. He died in 1945, ended up in somebody's house, whole other issue, terrorizing the house. Because he didn't like them being happy, because he never was happy in his life. So anyway, we got him to cross, and his cellmate actually came and got him. But he was Roman Catholic, and we asked why he didn't cross over, or why didn't he leave after he died, and he said, well, they don't like my kind there. So his belief system, even though all his life he probably left the church, but as soon as he died and wasn't worm food, he went, oh crap, there is something? Nope, I'm not going to the light, because I know if this is going on, then I know through my religious background, my Roman Catholic upbringing, that I will be going to hell because I killed somebody. And we had to go, no, dude, it's okay. You just have to go deal with it once you get there, but you're good to go. And as soon as, because of a religious spark that person had, we just have to give him that thought. The what if? Well, if Jesus died for my sins, why would I still be punished?
Something here.
And all he had to do is think about it in his little ghostly head, just for a split second. And that spark opened a door for a friend to come through, a trusted friend, not just some person they don't know. A trusted friend comes through and goes, no, you can come. And it wasn't like we're crossing him over. He leaves. He leaves with his buddy. And in this case, guy bursts into tears, off he goes. But there are those who they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to anything we say. They're just,
right.
They were bad people here. And over time, they continue, like, imagine being in a bad mood and just letting it fester for 30, 40, 50, 75 years. Then you're a real negative chunk of space. And those are the ones that I don't like dealing with.
Yeah, and they're deprived of certain things that they were used to experiencing. But you were doing something just now that I think that more researchers in demonology should. What you were doing is you were taking the data sample for what it says, for what it points to, for what it alleges. And that is an absolute, that's incredible that you were doing that, because most people don't. And what I mean by that is this: you're taking what this entity is saying to you and you're reading into it. First of all, that goes against what this person is telling us, goes against anything that Christianity says. If you die, you're either completely gone or you go to one place or the other. But if you look at the data sample and interpret it for what it's speaking to us, it speaks to at least saying that, hey, listen, this phenomenon is a little bit more complicated, a little bit more of a gray area than just dying and immediately going to hell or immediately going to heaven. And it was doing exactly what you did by, looking at case studies and going through haunting stuff and listening to these entities and listening to their interests. What were their prayers? What were they after? What were they valuing, even in possession cases? It took me that pilgrimage to kind of shed the dogma that I grew up in. And that's why, like we were talking about the Dybbuk earlier, when you get into the Dybbuk phenomenon and you go into the 16th century, what's called the age of the demoniac, you can see that Isaac Luria and Jaime Vital, the two prominent exorcists in that period, their case studies consisted of one of two possessing entities. You mentioned that this one of the characteristics earlier, but one of these entities was somebody who died before their time. Someone who, just for whatever reason, they died before they were supposed to. So it could be murder, it could be suicide, it could be tragedy, anything like that. Even if it's somebody who died when they were supposed to die, but there's still something holding them earthbound. Now, that was one possessing entity. The other possessing entity, which some people would call a demon, was your malevolent entity. A malevolent entity who had a different belief system and who was evil. It would try to kill anything in its path. And a lot of them were rapists, murderers, pillagers, people who were genuinely the most evil, sinister beings that anybody would want to meet in their lifetime. And so those are the two common possessing entities that Isaac Luria and Jaime Vital met. And what's most fascinating about their work in particular is that when they would encounter these possessing entities, these entities would shed light into the belief systems and reality of the world they had translated into. So we have different values than they do. There are a lot of people in that dimension who would possess people in this and say, hey guys, I'm just here because I want you to give my body a proper burial.
Ah, yeah.
My body's naked, or it's laying out there. It's not beneath the earth. Can you put me where I'm supposed to belong and do my religious rituals? And another person would say, you know what, I need help. I tell people all the time this particular story because it's just incredible. Jaime Vital had a case where he had went to bed one night in a dream. In a dream, his favorite student ever came to him in the dream, and this particular student had died a year before. And he said, Master, I need your assistance. I need you to pray for me. I need your help. And he said, so tomorrow I'm going to come to you personally. And so Jaime Vital goes to bed, doesn't think anything of it, goes, the next day, goes to work, does everything, he gets off of work, cooks dinner, his day's done, sun's setting, puts his bathrobe on, he goes to bed, he's thinking, okay, maybe that was a fluke, I must have missed it, whatever. As soon as he starts to drift off asleep, the door, there's someone at the door, somebody's knocking on the door, it's fascinating. Oh my God, and he opens the door, and from the shadows emerges a little girl holding the hand of her mother. And the mother says, this is my daughter. She told me your address. This is where she wanted to come tonight. I don't know why. I'm just doing it to put up with her and whatever. And as soon as they make eye contact, the little girl runs to him, hugs him, and says, Master, I told you I would come to you today.
Oh, wow.
And so they, for the next 2 hours, he's talking to his favorite student in the body of a young girl. So what does that speak to me as a researcher? It speaks to any researcher. It should tell us all that, first of all, their reality, their belief system and value system is not ours. It's ancient. If you go back into Sumer and Mesopotamia, that was the whole reason they tried to give their people, especially, obviously they're dead. That's why they wanted to give their dead proper burials. They would send them off with different offerings because they believed that what they were giving to their deceased family members would actually benefit them in the next world. Now, if that wasn't true, then why do we have ghosts who even in modernity are worried about where their body's buried? And if they did give them a proper burial? Let's take a step further. If that's not true, why is it that Catholicism still has to give last rites?
Yeah.
Because they feel that if they're sending these people off into eternity, that it's going to benefit them. So the study of demonology has to take a deep, well-deserved breath and say, maybe we're looking at demonology the wrong way, and maybe we need to look at it as afterlife phenomenon. And then we can go on to the exorcistic rites. But yeah, I mean, that's what really turned my head in this research.
Yeah, and I agree. I think to look at it as more of the afterlife research as opposed to the term demon has been demonized. Basically, when you say it's a demon, all of a sudden everything's black and gray and evil, right. and it's broken. I think that way of thinking is closed-minded, just to be blunt. Yeah. And it doesn't help in research going forward. We had the fellow, this prisoner we crossed over. Mm-hmm. When the psychic was there, she said, "Oh, there's a lady in this neighborhood." And we heard from the clients there. They said, "Yeah, the people in the neighborhood keep seeing this very dark, demonic shape." And it was in a number of houses, this woman that was really scary looking. And the psychic didn't know anything about that, but she bumped into her. And this lady was just wandering. And what she was, and poor lady, a nice little old Italian grandmother passes away. And she thought she still had work to do around the house. So she stayed. She didn't cross.
There we go.
She started being seen in some of the houses, and they brought in a priest and to do an exorcism of this evil woman, because of course they didn't believe in ghosts. If it was a shadow in the room, then it's got to be a demon. And during the course of trying to exorcise this person, the priest, which was actually her priest, was calling her evil and to leave evil person and going through all this stuff, which she wasn't evil. And it actually, as a result of that, it deformed her being. Yeah. She became she didn't become what she was called. She just wasn't the same physical shape anymore. So she looked really scary, and she was really, really upset, and she would keep going to the different houses. Yeah, and it was and unfortunately we couldn't, because she was afraid of being seen. And we run into this a lot where the psychic will remotely go into a house and so, there's a ghost standing in the kitchen. The ghost turns around and looks at her and goes, "You can see me?" And it's like, poof, they're gone. They don't want to have any time with that. They don't want to deal with it. They don't want to cross up. They don't want to talk about crossing over. They don't want to talk about anything. They just want to be left. They just leave me alone, and they blend into the wall. We had one a week or so ago, just actually morphed right into the walls. Yep. As soon as he understood we were asking him questions, he'd put his head down and he was gone.
He must be an introvert.
Yeah, he just leave me alone. I'm happy where I am, and that's it. But other ones are all running forward, going, "No, I'll leave. Come on, I'll pack my bags and get my friends to go." But this guy, no, he didn't want to go. But that's what this lady was like, and unfortunately, she's still there. She's still wandering from house to house.
And I believe that 100%. I mean, I've seen some of that in my own cases, but you know what? You struck a chord with me when you said that, because first of all, I think demonology, at least the discipline of research, in modernity, it's been stunted. And what do I mean by that? Well, I could say this. St. Basil of Caesarea was talking about these entities manifesting through the coagulation of water. That's how deep they were. That's how deep they were thousands of years ago. And that's why it's a crazy thing to see, because it's like, I don't know if it was competition that stifled the imagination of the demonology in the 20th century. I have no idea, I don't know. But I could say this, that when you're talking about how that entity's manifesting, that's what really brought my mind to what Basil said and what Origen said, and many of these different theologians and researchers. But are these okay, let's take it like this. If we are dealing with disincarnate consciousness, then is it possible that a lot of these entities are not manifesting their material image, but they're manifesting their internal emotions, right? And a lot of times, and I've seen this even in especially attachments, where if you have an entity that's depressed, or if it's committed suicide, it will have a dark apparition, especially if it's attached. Like I've seen them come in like a cloud and lay on somebody. And why is that? Is it because it's a dark spirit, or that it was no? Maybe it's very possible that what we are seeing sometimes are not just entities that want to manifest a certain way, but entities that cannot help manifesting a certain way. Or, you know what I mean? Like, it's not just black and white here. There are many possibilities just in thinking of how it is they're manifesting. What do you think about that? I mean, does that make sense at all? I mean,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating that the way... I'm quite impressed, because I've talked to demonologists before, and you just kind of roll my eyes half the time. But yeah, I'm impressed on the way that you've actually broken this down, and that you're going over and above regular research into this.
Yeah, and I told somebody the other day, I forget what show I was on. I stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, these people, like my heroes that I have. That I have in my library, these guys are actual gods, dude. I mean, they're just transcendent in every way. But if they are, okay, so how are they manifesting? Let's go down that road for a bit. Like, if you saw somebody, let's talk about somebody who has suicidal ideation, or somebody that's depressed. Would you see that? Most of the time you would. Most of the time, in my cases, they'll stop bathing, they slump over, their body language changes. They cut themselves off from the outside world. So then what would that interpret? Like, how would that person manifest as a spirit?
Pretty much the same.
Right. It's so again, we're looking at personality here and not fallen nature. I'm getting too excited here, but it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. I think that, see, if we are to believe that when we understand the names of a demon, that we have authority over it, then I would think, if I was a demon, that I wouldn't tell you my real name. And so that's why I believe that systematic demonology, the belief that these entities are all hierarchical and they're fallen. I think that's their last attempt at true anonymity. Yeah. Because I think, how about this aspect of it? I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff at you. If you continue to tell someone who has never been religious that they're a demon, they'll be a demon. That's what they'll answer to.
Yeah. Of course, you just eventually it's like it's brainwashing. It is basically you're beating the person down into telling them who they are. And
exactly.
And if you're doing it, and then someone else comes up and does it, and another person does it, and then they're just like, "Oh crap, I guess I am."
Yeah, exactly right. It's abuse. I'm just going to go here. I feel very comfortable right now, and I appreciate this, because it's I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here because I think it's very vital to the field. If we do not treat some of these entities, or if we don't even consider the option that some of these entities are disincarnate, then we will have even further the curse that caused them to stay. I want to say that by or at least clarify that with this. When Isaac Lurie and Jaime Vital performed their exorcists, the banishing of a being was the last resort. It wasn't the first option.
What was the first option?
Why are you here? First of all, how did you die? Why are you possessing this person? What is your relation to this person? How about this one? Are you male or female? And through their investigations, an honest intellectual pilgrimage into this research, they added more to this field than anyone else has. Why? Because they didn't throw these people in hell at the very first slight emotion. It wasn't a stench that made them run away. They were actual researchers. And so sure, they had holy water. Sure, they had different incantations. Sure, they had fumigants. But that was all just in case nothing else worked. So, they would go through their questions. And if that entity didn't want to leave, and if that person, the individual demoniac, no longer gave that possessing entity consent, then they brought out the big guns. Why? Because they believed that the banishment of a being was the last resort. So if that was their last resort, what in the heck have we been doing to people who have been possessing people? Does it make sense? That's a profound question, because it's just, again, it's been stunted. And I'll stop rambling. I get really passionate.
Rambling's good. It's actually was kind of very relevant to one of the jobs that I had. My last gig as a member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, I was running a prolific offender unit. It was the top 50 people in the community that were responsible for about 90% of the calls of service. So these guys were the guys who broke into your car and stole the change out of the ashtray and rifled through stuff, because they were all drug addicted. So what we had to do is go out and sit down with them and basically say, what is your name? Where are you from? Where are your parents? What kind of drugs do you use? Have you ever been in recovery before? And the whole goal was to get them into recovery, where beforehand they were the bad guys that you'd grab and throw in jail.
Yeah.
But it didn't help. It doesn't help the being themselves, because all it does is they go to jail, come out, and do the same thing. But unless they get into recovery, and then recovery address, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse as a child through psychiatric assistance, they're going to go back into the cycle.
Yeah, they're repeat offenders.
You have to look at them as the person they are. And I used to tell the guys who I supervised, I said, just take a deep breath and look at them and think about them when they were like 5-6 years old. Mm-hmm. And that's the person you're talking to, because these kids, they had sexual abuse victim at around 5-6 years old. That is sometimes where they froze in life. And at 20, their mind is still, they're very confused and very broken, and therefore drug addicted, because it's dead in that. So once you dig through that, find out who they are as people, and it helps move them to the next chapter of their life. And of course, if we couldn't get them to voluntarily go into recovery after our conversation, we followed them around until they broke into your car. And then instead of getting 30 days probation, they got 18 months in jail. So they got forced recovery.
That's incredible. Yes.
Continue contacting with them to check to see how they were doing, even if they were in custody. And when they got out, we made a point of bumping into them again, saying, hey, you want to go for lunch? How's everything going? But they were people. They weren't, quote unquote, bad guys.
Right.
And that's the way society is really made. Somebody breaks into your shed, I'm going to kill him. It's get off my lawn kind of thing. But it's like, no, dude, who is the guy who broke into your shed, and why did they do it? They did it to take things to sell because they needed drugs. I ran an armed robbery unit. Armed robbery is a symptom of a medical condition called drug addiction. Mm-hmm. So, no, you're not going to get thrown in jail for 10 years for robbing a bank. I'm going to find out what exactly the drugs you're taking and how can I fix that. So you take that into what you're talking about. You've got these dead people who are so screwed up, and they're coming in and they're occupying somebody else.
Yes, sir.
Or trying to occupy somebody else, or partially occupying them. Find out who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. And that's when Skeeter, who's a psychic, when you cross people over, I interview the dead person, and she does all the woo-woo shit stuff. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to dig down. And in your case, when you're dealing with the much more negative effects on a living person by a dead person, it's very important. And like those ancient researchers did back in the day.
Yes, sir.
You sit down and you say, okay, why are you here? Basically, what can I do to help you?
Exactly. And that's, dude, so check this out. This is pretty cool too, because you're going into the aspect of, number one, repeat offenders because they never got help, because of their drug addiction. Well, sending them to rehab, they would see physicians, they would see doctors, they would see people that were trying to wean them off of something. Well, wouldn't you know, man, that the earliest exorcists were physicians.
Yeah.
Which ought to give any demonologist insight into this. You know what I mean? It's just, so it's been a fascinating field of study, but that's what they did. The banishment. So let me back up and say this. The idea of an exorcism was always defined as the banishment of an unwanted being. Imagine a child who felt unwanted. He felt like he was an unwanted being. And then he grows up and he does all kinds of stupid stuff, dies and possesses somebody. And the first thing out of the priest's mouth is, "You're an unwanted being." So, right, that was the last resort. That wasn't the first option. That was if nothing else works. If this entity doesn't want to work with us, if he's rebellious, if he doesn't want help, then that's not why he's here. That's how they broke it down. And they said, okay, in that case, we're going to get it out of you. Now let's talk about repeat offenders. If we do not heal that spirit, if we do not help that spirit, I mean, what about the woman who possessed someone? Okay, this is one of Loria's cases, and she just wanted proper burial. If you don't do what she asks, just simple, here's my body. And they actually went and found it. It was right where she said it was. But what if they didn't do that? That entity is going to repeat offend. She's it's going to leave that body. You'll banish it, and then it'll go and possess somebody else. And now that problem is somebody else's problem. When all you had to do is actually act like a person, and just say, you know what, maybe I should go do this for her. But they did that, and that entity left, and that person was never possessed again. So this could be a lot harder, or this could be a lot easier than we think it is.
You can make it easy, or you can do it the hard way.
It sounds like a line you might have used in your as a police officer.
No, it's Canada.
That's true.
If you're running away from me and I say stop, I will yell louder next time.
Like Farva?
Stop, halt, or I'll yell halt again, eh?
That makes me think of Super Troopers and Farva.
Oh, yeah. How's it going, eh? Yeah. The moose at the border should have told you we were closed. We're talking to Nathaniel Gillis about demons and demonology and things like that. If you are playing along at home, do you have a website, right? You've got,
yes, sir.
It's njgillis.com?
Yes, sir. That's me.
And it'll take you through and check him out. Also on Facebook and on Instagram. The Facebook and the Instagram. Definitely look up Nathaniel J. Gillis, and if you got any questions, give him a shout. And again, go to his website and check out njgillis.com. Nathaniel, in your experiences, and it's almost like I'm it's just, the questions lawyers do before you get sworn in as an expert. In your training, as a result of your training and experience, tell us what. Anyway, if you're not a policeman, you have no idea what. So anyway, the one of the things I was really interested in is the whole incubus succubus thing.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit of what are they, and as a result of your research and your eye on demonology, where do they fit in? You're sitting down, right? Yeah.
Okay, dude, this is a different level, man. These entities, they're on a different dimension, man. So let me back up and say this. when I first got into the Incubus studies, I was trained, I should say, to believe that these entities were just, the incubus obviously was a male spirit or a spirit that appeared in a male form and would have sexual intercourse with a woman. And that was it. And likewise with the succubus. And the extent of my knowledge began and ended with, I think maybe in Psalms 91 that Lilith, she was a succubus spirit, and that's where we get the word nightmare. Okay, cool. That's all I knew. It wasn't until about maybe 8 years ago that I started looking into this deeper, and it's a far more sinister aspect to demonology than I have heard in, just virtually anywhere other than the back halls of a library. But these entities, the incubus entity, the legend is that women will go to bed at nighttime, and incubus will slither his body into the bed and will groom her through touch or words or massage or whatever into intercourse. And then once that's done, the entity leaves, and essentially everyone, at least in my research that I was reading and everything, everyone else believed that was the beginning and ending of the incubus legend. And essentially, not only that, but that it began and ended with spectrology. In other words, it was just an apparition. It wasn't actual, collision. Now, of course, that can't happen because it's a spirit. And that's where I thought, okay, well, that's all fine and dandy. But again, that blueprint, it had to fall apart. It was paper mache in my hands when you look at the actual case studies of incubi. Father Sinistrari of Amino is one of the great progenitors, the great additions to this research of incubus. He records multiple cases where people, I wouldn't call them clients, but patients of his, considering that these entities are like a disease, where he would actually go into the bedroom within an hour of the event taking place and collect semen samples.
Jeez.
Yeah, physical, tangible, visible semen samples that he would collect in multiple cases, which really drew a line in the sand, because spirits are supposed to be spirits. They're intangible, incorporeal entities. But when you look at the case studies say quite the opposite. These were actual physical substances, excretions from a body, left in and around the bed. So Father Sinistrari got a group of doctors together, and he said, okay, we need to examine this in a different dimension here. Maybe we're not understanding an incubus for what it really is. So the samples, let's talk about the samples they collected. They're not samples like you and I would think they are. These samples some of them were dry, some of them were black and discolored, some of them were yellow, green, and orange. So you had people, these doctors, who many of them they were coroners and stuff, so they would do autopsies. One of I think it was really the only answer that they gave to this phenomenon was that these spirits were going into the graveyards at nighttime and milking the carcasses of the recently deceased.
What? Really?
I told you. Yeah, I told you, man. You got to be sitting down for this. Yeah, this is crazy. He said, and so he said, we say that because of how old these semen samples were. And he said it was as if they came from a cadaver. Yeah, cadaver. Yeah, so that's what they came to the conclusion of. And so that really led them into believing, okay, then if it's a deceased person, it would have to have been someone who's recently deceased. Now, if we go back into the mythology of the vampire, they had the same kind of idea. A vampire would only suck the blood of a recently deceased person because they didn't like the appearance of the person if they had been decomposed. So all of this fits into it, but the incubus phenomenon is far deeper than any imagination that modernity can have, unless we go back into the ancient writings and say, okay, let's take everything we think about demonology and throw it away and let's start from scratch. A demon is not what it does, right? Because that's what I was taught. An incubus, oh, that's a spirit that does a certain act. That's not true. That's what it does. But what is it after? Right? Like, what does it believe in? What's the whole purpose of having coition with a mortal, especially if you're disincarnate? And that's when we get into what's called demonic pregnancy.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the darkest corners of my research. But yeah, so it was always demonic pregnancy. So I want to begin with this. And I don't know if I'll ever write a course on demonology, but if I did, I would start out with this. A demon is not what it does. A demon is what it believes in. What do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? Because when we hear about an incubus, we think, okay, an incubus is a spirit that has intercourse with a woman. And that's the beginning and ending of it. That's the sum total of what an incubus is. So then when I say, okay, then what's a Dybbuk? Oh, well, a Dybbuk is an entity, it's a spirit that possesses people. Okay, cool. No, it's not cool. I'm not satisfied with that because that's not what they are. That's what they do. Now, and I'll tell you what really revolutionized my understanding of that. When you go into the research in the incubus, did you know that an incubus was a Dybbuk? And that a Dybbuk was an incubus? They're one and the same? Right? Matter of fact, before a Dybbuk became a possessing entity, he was first an incubus. Right?
Yeah.
You've got to throw all this stuff away and say, okay, what are they doing? What are they after? So when you go into the Dybbuk encounters in the 16th century, 99% of your women who came to you for help, they had possession cases, obviously. But before that, they would have either a dream of intercourse with a spirit or an actual physical intercourse with a spirit, like where they could see it and they were conscious. That's how it began. Now, modern demonologists would say, oh, that's an incubus, not a Dybbuk. And I would say, okay, but it's a Dybbuk case. No, that's just what we're doing is we're personifying their actions, and we're not really understanding what they're after. And I'll stop rambling.
Well, throw this back out at you. Post-puberty, humans have dreams of sex. And back in the day, could these young women been having dreams, like basically a sexual dream? Or did they describe them as being the person they're having sex with, not an actual human, but something different? Well,
that gets into a very interesting situation there, because your earliest demonologists believed they were against, let me just say this, self-gratification.
Yeah.
Because they believed, even back into ancient Judaism, they believed that when that happens, that the specific entity, her name was Lalit. Her name is Pakad Lila in Psalms 91, but they said that she would go and collect it and then use that to create children with, it's spoken about everywhere. But yes, sir. And so I would say this, to answer that question. When you get into the victimology of these incubus cases and these Dybbuk cases, they prefer young women that have just started with puberty. And that's why I think a lot of your hauntings, specifically malevolent hauntings, will occur with women of that age, because they're stepping into puberty and these entities know it. But to answer that question even more specifically and deeper, of course, they would have dreams if it wasn't of, now watch this, a lot of them were widows who had a dream about coition with their deceased husband.
Okay.
But it wasn't their deceased husband. And when they woke up, there was a physical, tangible manifestation of a presence there. There was a semen sample in the bed, which really freaked them out, and it should, because they're thinking, number one, I thought that was a dream, and I really missed my husband. What is this? Let's go all the way across the world. Let's go into Islamic mythology. When they go into their jinn possessions, the very first question they ask in their exorcistic rites is, have you had a dream that you've had intercourse with someone? And if you have you had a secondary dream that you have been impregnated because of it? Why? Well, first of all, what's an exorcist do? He deals with possession. So that means, right then and there, that they're talking to a woman who's possessed by a spirit, and they're just trying to figure out if you've had intercourse in a dream or not. What is this? What is this telling us? It's telling us that possession and pregnancy to these entities are one and the same. And how do they do it? They're doing it as an incubus. They're doing it as a Dybbuk. But that's just their action. But that has nothing to do with the agent here. Why are they doing it? That's what I'm after.
Interesting. Like you get into that older, what's her name? I think it was Teague or something. Amanda Teague, who in England married a ghost of a pirate. I think they're divorced now, but that was a couple of years ago. She married an 18th century Haitian pirate, and she was in Northern Ireland somewhere when he showed up. It was very, very interesting. Her description of this fellow who would, slip in and she was having spiritual sex, and it's all about her idea of being able to feel the energy and nothing to do with self-massage, we'll call it.
Right.
It very, very interesting, but also, as now me having to take a step back going,
right,
who is this lady and what is her background, and
Correct.
All of a sudden is she is connecting to this? There can be a form of sexual possession.
Yes.
And I think there was a gentleman, actually, another one of these, this happens in the UK, it seems a lot more than out here, but that fellow that lived in an old pub, and he had a succubus constantly visiting him over the years. And possibly it could have been just, one of the women that worked in the pub 200 years ago took a shining to him, and she's still hanging around there. But are these beings still what you would consider human, or are they morphed?
Well, I think there's many of them that are morphed, and I'm going to throw out something, and this is another aspect of my work that's it's just a little bit interesting. It's crazy. I mean, it really is. But there are those that have morphed, and there are those that have molted.
Oh, molted. What do you mean by that?
They grew out of themselves.
Okay.
And they're still here. And these entities are like serial killers.
Okay.
It's almost like they exist in a fraternity of serial killers. Their pathology, their victimology, the scarifications that they put on their victims' bodies. I mean, and again, demons are not what they do; they're what they believe in. So we would call them incubus. Okay, fine. Some of them are incubus in terms of what they do, but these entities have an infatuation, a fatal fascination with pulling people, women, underwater, raping them, and then scarring their bodies.
What? Really?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have cases where the women who have actually been raped in the water, in bathtubs or showers or whatever, they'll come out of it and they'll have bite marks on them.
Interesting.
Now, first of all, that if I was a criminal profiler, I want DNA. And if there's no DNA, then why is there teeth? And if there's teeth, why does that entity want us to know there's teeth? Why does it want us to believe it has teeth? Correct? That's a serial killer, at least in the pathology. Now, this right here, I have my first book's out, A Moment Called Man now. My second book's going to be out here soon. But my third book is going to dive into the pathology of these entities, because it's as if these particular entities, the molted ones, they're a completely different breed. They're far more intelligent. Their belief system and currency is different. Their victimology is different. Let's talk about Sinistrari. Sinistrari had a case, incubus case, where he would pull the eyelids back at the moment, like when the person had died, autopsy, they pulled the eyelids back and found scarification underneath the eyelids.
Really? Under the eyelids?
Underneath the eyelids. Yeah, if it was a woman, sometimes it would be, it didn't matter which gender it was, but it would be underneath the armpits, in the genitalia, anywhere where not only that others, the public, would be unable to see it, but most, like 99% of the time, even the person who had the scars on them never knew about them. So why is this, like, what in the world are they doing? Right? I mean, my God, we can sit here, I mean, not you and I, but just demonology as a researcher, we could sit here and wade in the inch-deep waters of, okay, they did this and this and this, and I got it on tape, and high five, let's go home. But again, if we do not understand these entities, then they will be repeat offenders. And not just for my generation, specifically if they're immortal, not because they cannot die, but because they have, then they could follow my kids. They could go to the next generation until someone says, okay, we gotta stop and think here. What rules are they playing by? So that's why in most of my interviews, I say, first of all, if they're playing by different rules, then they're playing a different game.
Yeah.
And we have to understand what game these particular entities, not even the malevolent hauntings, at least some of them, but these entities that can sit across from you and make you feel like you're looking at an alien because you cannot relate to it. It is disincarnate, but like I said, it's molted and it's after something. And that's what I am going to spend the rest of my life looking into, unless I solve it fairly quickly, which I don't believe I will.
No, probably not. It's about an hour and a half after you die, it'll go, oh, that's what it is.
Dang it.
Now I got the answers. It's interesting you're talking about those sexual batteries, sexual assaults happening in a shower, in the water, because you and I know as empathic people or empaths, the movement of water is basically an energy that we draw from.
Oh my God, I love it.
And you could, like, if you really want to know the name of the lady who's standing to your left, and I mean you, Nate, there's a lady standing on your left. That's where you're getting goosebumps on your left arm. Anyway, the why you get them on your left arm. In the shower, you just ask her name and you'll hear it. And you either hear it in your mind or some people actually hear it like they're standing beside you. And I always say, yeah, well, you're in the shower, at least when you piss yourself, at least when you hear it, you're not make a mess. But the movement of water, and you and I like being around moving water, tidal water, rivers, and also growth forests, deep forests, because it's grounding. But that's energy for us. Well, you could put somebody in a shower situation, and there's a being that needs to make contact, they draw from that energy. And moving water, or the water specifically in a shower, or if they're in a creek somewhere, it's easy for that being to manifest in a physical connection, because they're tapped into a whack of energy. Ghosts around where I live are really common near the water. Like the hauntings, and if you talk to paranormal investigators, thunderstorms, rainy nights, those are always good times to get some communication. Train tracks near a railway track, because this basically not what's called static electricity, but the energy that's conducted even through the sun beating down on those rails, and the movement of over top of the rails going over rivers and things. It conducts a bit of electricity, so it's easy to see them around those. So when you were saying that these assaults were happening in water, it totally resonates with what I've been finding in my talking to people who deal with dead people. The freakiest part about this is that the biting. Biting is common, and it's literally getting somebody to take a picture of the dental, like the dental pattern, and you can almost use that to identify somebody.
I know.
You've got some, but in this case, you'd probably have the ghost bit Jane and the ghost bit Bob, and look, the teeth are matching. So what is it they're trying to do? It could be, in an old paranormal group I was with, we had gone to a house where, and this is very, very interesting. This would be interesting for you, is that when the young couple moved into the house, the woman, who was quite intuitive, was walking from the living room area in down like little hall towards the kitchen, past the fireplace on her right, and she heard an older man call her a really bad, you effing this, get the hell out of my house kind of thing.
Right.
And she just stopped and said, well, okay, shook her head and kept walking. Well, her husband, lovely couple, never had arguments or fights or anything. And he got either drunk one night or really sick. Well, actually, it was both. Mm-hmm. Once he got really, really sick and he wasn't feeling good, he was sitting at the table. And she looked at him, and he looked up at her, and his eyes just completely changed.
Yep.
And he stood up and he punched her right in the face. So the police get involved. He gets hauled. As soon as he crosses the threshold out onto the porch, he's in tears. I don't know why I did that. It's not me. I don't know what's going on. And off he goes to spend the night in the Hooskow. Mm-hmm. And after that, 6 months later, no problem. The next time he had a little bit too much wine, and he was sitting at the kitchen table again. And the same thing. He looked at her, and his eyes just changed, like it wasn't even him. He got up, started yelling and screaming at her, and started slapping her around. Police get called again. They ended up having to move because in hindsight, we were imagining this jerk ghost human in the house. Mm-hmm. Every time the husband dropped in vibration due to like having a few too many to drink, and then or when he got sick, this thing stepped in and used his vessel to lay a licking on the woman because he just didn't like women. Yeah. So that's how he became physical. She could hear him. Mm-hmm. Like he was loud, enough for her to actually hear him as the ghost trying to get him out of his house. But imagine me as a policeman, and you you come to me and say, it's not really my husband. It's like, obviously he's being possessed by the old guy who wants us out of the house. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I just got to process this. You can tell it to the court. It's going to be a little weird. But that's literally what had happened. And the two investigators we sent there, the two paranormal investigators, were women. So that didn't go over well with the dead guy. But they can be, if they can't become physical, like drawing from the energy around you, mm-hmm. they can definitely step into the weakest body that's around. Yeah. Like you were saying, that it's if they want either your attention, or in this case, they wanted them out. They did, and to get out of there.
I would actually think that maybe that spirit was a drinker in his history. Maybe he was. I'm speculating, but yeah. Oh
yeah, he probably was. And he was just an ass, and he didn't cross. And this is my house, damn it, and I don't like women. Yeah, and that's it. And we get those. We get the ones, the guys who fall off the wagon. They're in the bar having maybe just one drink, mm-hmm. and they're having going through a low time in their life, and all of a sudden they're ordering drinks, and every drunken ghost in the building is stepping in to feel that rush of alcohol again.
I 100% believe that. Again, it's the data sample. It speaks to it. It's like at some point you got to say, okay, you know what, I can't. I have to say it's true because it's been there for a long time. But, so that really gets into a lot of the victimology of these entities and why it is that they're ritualistic, they're predatory. Yeah. They're systematic. They have their own taste for certain people or certain things. But yeah, their belief system's different. And a lot of time, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, their belief system is askew. It was askew in life, while they were living. Mm-hmm. Then they die and realize, I thought I was just going to be worm food. And, there is something going on? Well, yeah, and they stay back, and they end up staying back and realizing they're with a whole bunch of like-minded ghosts or like-minded beings. And they're seeing things differently, and those beings start getting comfortable with the manipulation of energy around them, and how to present themselves to a living person. And some of them will present as as like the classic demon, the little horned guy with the red eyes sitting in your closet.
Right.
Because they know it scares the hell out of you.
Exactly right. So, yeah. And then a lot of it's propaganda, obviously. It's designed. They'll take an image or a form intentionally because they know that it's, you'll be terrified of it. But I'm fascinated by it. I think it's the most interesting, enchanting research I've ever encountered. But, yeah.
You lived in a haunted house, didn't you?
Yes, sir. Yeah. That was nuts.
Did your mother see stuff?
She does. She did. Yeah, she didn't in that house.
Okay.
But yeah, she's a sensitive man. She sees all kinds of stuff. She'll tell me, "I just saw a shadow person." Okay.
Yeah.
Like it's nothing. It's like, what? Normal people be scared to death. But yeah, I mean, that's when I was first introduced to this reality. I mean, I saw a shadow figure that was about 7 foot tall, staring at me through my window at night.
Crikey.
Yeah, it was pretty intense. I actually went outside the next day. It was in the wintertime, and I saw the footprints, which really freaked me out. That's
very unique to actually have them do that.
Yeah, so
to actually have a being come through like that.
I didn't know what it wanted. I just knew that I didn't want it. I was like, man, leave me alone. I'm trying to play my video games.
It's looking at you because you glow in the dark. You're a very high vibration person, so it's like, oh, who the heck's this?
Right.
In my neighborhood. That's why a lot of times we'll get called and there'll be like the 3-year-old kid who can't sleep because there's a lady in a rocking chair at the foot of the bed and a man hovering over top of him and they're telling him stories and saying, "Hey, who are you? What are you up to?" And the kid's going, "Mom, Dad,
right.
I don't want to sleep by myself anymore." I can't really do anything, but they're just drawn to the kid because the kid literally is just love and light and glows. So every dead person in the neighborhood wants to show up and go, "Hey, this feels really good hanging out with you. What's your name?" And the kid's losing his poop because he doesn't want dead people at the foot of his bed.
Of course, man. Yeah. And you're right. It happens often. And again, that goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's just like, I think that it's high time that the study of demons just takes a deep breath and says, okay, maybe we've been researching this a little wrong here. And once we kind of adjust our sails into this direction of, okay, is it possible they're disincarnate and that we've been demonizing humans? Then that would open up many doors for us because we have tools now. We have psychology. We have all kinds of different things that we can, at least in one dimension, understand them and where they're coming from.
Yeah. Now you founded a philosophy.
Yep.
What is that?
It's called Epiphenomenal Preternatural Philosophy. And
easy for you to say.
Oh, it's just
you founded PEP
term. Yeah, it's a fancy term. No, it's just. See, when I was growing up in that haunted house of mine, it was so traumatic at times where the only way I could internalize it without just being stone cold paralyzed in fear, the only way I could internalize it was to look at the phenomenon as though it was a language to me, as if fear was a communication, as if the trauma was a vehicle of meaning. And then I said, okay, if that is the case, were these entities intending for me to be afraid? Or was I afraid because I was a kid and I was in the presence of something that I had no frame of reference for? Or, is it possible that I have misinterpreted what I experienced? And so what I decided is, I've done a lot of philosophy in my life and, I studied it. And so I said, okay, let's look at this logically. If I liken it into a pool of water, and I'm on one side of the pool and I'm looking at the other side of the pool, and someone else steps in to the other side of the water, the pool. And their presence, their weight displaces the water in front of me, right? It sends waves to me. And so there's a wake in the water, and I'm looking at the waves, and then I'm looking at the person that caused them. Now, I have two choices here. I can measure the depth of the pool, the dimensions of the water, the depth, and then I could count the many waves that I'm feeling coming from that person. And I could say, you know what? These waves are that person. No, they're not. They're a secondary consequence of that person's presence, right? But they're not that person. And so what a lot of times parapsychology will do is they'll look at the height, width, and depth of the pool, scientifically measure what kind of dimensions and body of weight could push that water to such a degree, and say, okay, see, that tells us what that entity is, or who that entity is, or number one, here's the number one mistake, that in itself is the entity. No, it's not. The wake in the water is not the entity. It's a manifestation of its presence. Now, that entity could want you to feel that, or it may not want you to feel that. You may just feel that or experience fear and all this stuff because you're in its presence and you're still not understanding. You know what I mean? Those are some of the large questions that I had. But and I'm going to use another allegory here. The dimensionality of a chessboard is usually 8 by 8. You can count the many squares. Some of them differ how many squares they have. But does knowing the dimensionality of the chessboard tell you the rules of the game? Does it tell you the belief systems of the players? No. Does it tell you the pathology? What their strategy is? No, it doesn't. At all. Matter of fact,
That's a good way of putting it. No, it's a good analogy.
Yeah. So, see, the difference between phenomenon and epiphenomenon is this. Phenomenon is an action. It's an event. Epiphenomenon is an action or event that happens because of an action or an event, right? So in this case, phenomenon, the event would be the person standing in the water. The epiphenomenon would be the secondary consequence of that, which would be, okay, the waves. The waves are here because he's here. The waves are not him. The waves are not his presence. The waves are secondary consequence of his presence. And so when I got at that and I grasped that concept, then that made sense as to why demonology has been assigning descriptions to demons instead of actually defining the entities for themselves. I feel fear. Well, it's a spirit of fear. No, it's not. So it makes sense. That's because I grew up in a Christian tradition where we didn't have like spirits that made us fear. If we felt fear, then it was the spirit of fear, right? If a person was fighting suicidal ideation, they were fighting the spirit of suicide, right? And so what I decided was, okay, is it a spirit of suicide or is it a spirit of a person who committed suicide?
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
And we're on the other side of the pool, and we're feeling the emanations from its centeredness, its beingness. And we're saying, oh my God, it's a spirit of suicide. It's not. It's a spirit that emanates it because it has committed suicide.
Right.
That totally changed my understanding and worldview of demonology. Because we can take temperatures and not even know which end we stuck the thermometer in.
That's fascinating.
The mind of a madman.
The mind of a madman. Yeah. And your philosophy using giant words, which completely throws me off.
I'm going to take that out and just kind of I founded something.
I founded this.
Yeah.
If you really want to know, there's a book on it.
Oh.
And you have a new book coming out shortly that's we're going to be interested in. But the book that you have out now is A Moment Called Man.
Yes, sir.
And what is that about?
Well, okay, so it was two things. Number one, I wanted to pay homage to my Christian tradition before I completely abandoned their demonology. Oh my God, that's truthfully one of my intentions. But the secondary reason I wrote it is because I had lost a very good friend of mine. He also grew up in the Christian tradition. He was the rebel, and he got locked into drug addiction. And one night someone handed him a bag that he thought was cocaine, which this is going to sound strange, and I'm not obviously a proponent of this, but he knew enough about his poison of choice to know whether or not he could do that much. I don't know what he was thinking. You know what I mean? You know,
I understand. Yeah.
Well, somebody gave him 97% fentanyl, and so it was a horrific.
It's quick.
Yeah, it was done, man. So they actually did a murder investigation and everything because they were like, okay, this is too much of a hairy situation. But he was an empath, and he was one of those people where everyone would go to him for answers, but he was always the one left with the questions.
Is his name Mike or Mark?
His name was Brandon.
Okay, just great.
Yeah, man. So he was an empath. So I always tell people, and that's one of the points that I put in the book, is that with empaths, they will either manifest or they will medicate. And so a lot of the empaths that I've encountered that are addicts, they have been medicating the gift that they should be manifesting. And so they're just left feeling with, all the pain, and they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
So I deal with that in the book.
A lot of, in hindsight now, as somebody who dealt with a lot of people in addiction and a lot of people with alcohol issues, I think the majority of them were empathic or higher vibration. Mm-hmm. And this gets me to a belief system that I have in regards to negative entities and the keeping of a higher vibration human being low in vibration by stepping in and intercepting the energy that we get from source.
That's brilliant.
So that is, and we touched on it briefly off air, but the monkey on your back, where people that back in the day had seen what looked like a physical monkey coming out of somebody's back and the face kind of over their shoulder of this monkey, but it looked like a cat's face with red eyes. And that is when that person gets into a depression or an illness or a drug addiction or something in their life pushes their vibration down. This thing steps in and keeps it down and holds them in addiction. And you really, to get that person out of the addiction, you need to remove that or they'll constantly fall back into it.
Correct.
That is a shamanic or removal or exorcism, but the unfortunate part is that being, that thing, that elemental being, that demon, once it's removed and steps off of the human being, it's not very far away from you the rest of your life. Right. It's just waiting for an opportunity to come back in and tap into and feed off of the energy that source, God, the universe gives each of us. Mm-hmm. And it really likes the higher vibration people because it's got the biggest tap being turned on from source.
Exactly.
So it's happy to be around the empathic types.
Yeah, I believe that.
And
that's a brilliant point.
It's sad, but it's here on the west coast of Canada, mm-hmm. a lot of First Nations, like Canadian, the Indian, who grew up in an abusive relationship and a very stressed family, left home, sexually abused, mm-hmm. and living on the streets, and very, very high vibration people, but in terrible addiction,
right? And
for alcohol or drug, and mental health challenges. And these things just feed on them and hold them into that. But they are the people who are the higher vibration. Mm-hmm. They just can't experience what it's supposed to be because of the addiction. It's sad, and it's
heartbreaking, man. It's true.
It is sad. And those are the people I worked with for such a long time, and I worked on. And around them, and I think maybe it is fortunate that the awakening that I had mm-hmm. was after I left working with those people, mm-hmm. because I think if I had it back then, it would have just been debilitating for me to go to work.
You would have been a war.
Yeah, it was hard. Like I've said, I've seen dead people all my life, and there were times like 10-year periods where I didn't see anybody dead, like a ghost, but I saw a lot of dead humans. Like, so it was like, okay, we're going to take that ability away from you right now because you're going to be dealing with a whole bunch of dead people. And like, in hindsight, I'm looking at it going, why all of a sudden I had a decade where I wasn't really connecting and seeing them other than the shadows out of the corner of your eye and that kind of thing. But that was kind of I had a breather from it. The universe said, you know what? Yeah, you see too much right now, but you're going to get in a position where you are going to go check on Uncle Bob, and he's not going to be alive, and you're going to have to deal with that. And you don't really need to see Uncle Bob yelling and screaming at you in the corner, saying, "Hey, I'm over here."
Right.
So it was interesting. Now, demonology itself, or the term demon, are you finding that they all have to be negative?
For it to be a demon?
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's only those who are who have a negative presence or are here for a negative occupation, here for a negative purpose. That would be, it's still covered under the demon side of things.
Yes, sir, it is. And that was always, demons were always the personification of evil. And even, in biblical antiquity, a demon was either a ghost or this is interesting too. They were either idols from another religion, they were ghosts, or they were actually just natural phenomenon. Like, and there's a lot of demons in the Old Testament that were just like demons of headaches and fever and famine. It's like, okay, those weren't actual demons, right? That's just the hot summer or something, But
it was just a description of anything negative that happened to us.
Yeah, and that's what we got locked into descriptions, and that has just wilted every petal of demonology for the last 1,000 years. I mean,
and that's my issue too, because I believe wholeheartedly in elemental beings sharing this planet, and the elemental beings are responsible for working on the planet and doing stuff. And like I said to you earlier, that I have a spirit guide who is a gohart, and a gohart is a half goat, half male, and it's Pan. Well, Pan back in the day was a god of the hillside by the ancient Greeks, and then he was a demon by the Christians. He hadn't changed. He was still the dude on the hillside making sure the weeds were growing properly. We just changed the perception.
Of course.
And so I'm not saying elemental beings are all fluffy and bouncy and cute. I mean, some of these are like the cat coming out of your back, or the monkey on your back. That's not a fluffy, friendly little thing. That is a demon. That is dark. That is scary. Right. Our friend, you and I have a friend, Sean Whittington, a demonologist. He sees these things like big, fuzzy, black caterpillars crawling up and down walls. They are there bringing dread and a low vibration into the house. And he can see those, and he pushes those out. To me, those are just elemental beings. Like here's an example. You've got a mammal dies, and it's laying on the dirt. How do we clean that up? I believe there's a elemental being that is responsible for maggots breaking that thing down. Okay, you will know him as Beelzebub, the Lord of the Flies. That's a demon.
That's interesting. We can get into that too, because that literally means Lord of the Dead.
Yeah.
Okay. That's interesting.
So his job is to break down all the mammals that are out there, and when Beelzebub's around, you get a lot of flies in a room when he shows up. So it's kind of interesting. But I believe him as being elemental and not demonic, scary. He just is in charge of things that are dead. What are dead things to us living humans? Those are bad. I was just going over, a friend of mine there's a smell coming from one of her neighbor's apartments. And she goes, do you know what a dead body smells like? And she put that out on Facebook. And I was like, yeah, I do. And and one of those things is you heard the term monkey brain. It actually, going back into our primal us, when you smell a dead human being, It's a very unique smell. Mm-hmm. It's a dead, rotting smell, but it's a very unique smell. And when you smell it once, every time you smell it again, that's the same thing. It's the same smell. Mm-hmm. But it triggers back to the day where we're dragging our asses through the forest and we smell it and we all of a sudden freeze and know we're not supposed to go around that corner because one of us has been killed.
That's interesting.
So when you walk around the corner, there's a saber-toothed tiger chewing on your neighbor. That smell of a dead person really resonates deep in our monkey brain to say, yeah, I'm not going around that corner. It's a survival instinct. Mm-hmm. That smell triggers your survival instinct to turn your butt around and go the other way. And that's how when I smell dead people, unfortunately, my job says to keep going into the room. Mm-hmm. So you're fighting with that. I don't want to go. I don't want to. Okay,
right. I don't want to see it
now. I don't want to see it. And then there's the Vicks vapor rub up the nose and the mask over top of it, and having to wait for body removal. Mm-hmm. But that is one of those things that it's obviously a negative because it's a dead person, but it's an overriding negative because it's one of us that's been killed. Mm-hmm. Our species, our clan, our whatever have been killed. Therefore, it's very dangerous to go there. So when we think of the spirit, the god, the elemental being, the demon that's in charge of the dead, mm-hmm. or cleansing, or, the Lord of the Flies, the Lord of the, that kind of thing, Beelzebub, it's got to be negative because it's death.
Yeah.
And we have to fall to that.
We do, and it just goes into the concept that I don't think that specifically demonology, we have to understand the afterlife. We have to understand we don't have to understand all levels, all dimensions, the height, width, and breadth of it. But we are getting material and data samples that are pointing to some very real possibilities here, and I think that's one of them. And I'm appreciative that you share that with me. I like that.
Yeah, it's an interesting look on death because being around dead people, and I have friends who work in mortuaries, which I wouldn't do that because, but when they see them, they're a lot cleaner than when I see them. I see them right after death, or I'm one of the first people to find them after a month or two of them missing. And what's really interesting between you and me, and my listener can go for a coffee right now, but just between you and me, mm-hmm. I've been to dead body scenes in houses where I'm the only policeman there. It was a small town, Canada kind of thing. So I show up, end up having to kick the door down and get air in the place and find, the Uncle Bob dead. Mm-hmm. And I have to call body removal, and I have to take photographs, and I have to do a search of like medications and look on the fridge if there's a DNR notice would do not resuscitate, so mm-hmm. it shows a sign if he may have been sick. So I've got a bunch of things I have to do, find identification, things like that, mm-hmm. and check the scene, make sure it's not an actual crime scene. But as I'm doing that, in hindsight, I look back on it, and there are times where I'm very quiet and I do the whole thing and fill out my notebook and I wait for about an hour for body removal. And there are other times where I'm actually talking to the dead person, telling them why I'm looking in the top drawer, why I'm going through his cupboards, why I'm going through his pockets, why I'm taking the pictures, why I'm doing every single thing I'm doing for the hour until body removal shows up. Mm-hmm. And a psychic friend of mine said is, because you're intuitive, you knew he was still there.
Correct.
The other times he had crossed over and he wasn't there. Mm-hmm. So my intuition was showing me that I had to explain myself as if he was there, because he was probably jumping up and down saying, hey, what are you doing? Hey, this is my stuff. Why am I curled up on the floor in the bathroom here? And why are you doing that? Which is one I specifically remember. A fella got drunk and he passed out on the toilet, and positional asphyxiation killed him. He fell between the toilet and the wall. Mm-hmm. And I was chatting with him like he was at the table drinking a coffee. And I was going through everything I was doing. And she said, my psychic friend says, no, he was there. And he was mindfully wanting to know why you were doing everything you were doing and not helping him. but he had been dead for a couple of days. But it was fascinating that I felt that. And it's interesting when you are dealing with a dead human that may in spirit still be there compared to a dead human when they're not there. And my friends in the mortuary or working in the morgue, one in Salem, Oregon, talks about things that they're just sleeping people that come in, and they talk to them too. But she doesn't think that they are in spirit there. These people, 90% of the people cross over. But she says, they'll talk to people, and this looks good on you. I'm going to do your makeup now, and then there's some people that they don't talk to. So it's interesting. It's interesting what we do as people to justify certain things around a dead body. I shouldn't say justify, but to
at least
to actually work around them.
Respect them. I mean,
oh yeah,
I think that saved you a lot from some attachments, because you just acknowledged them and was like, "Hey, how you doing? Sorry, I have to do this. I'm not. It's just, and that's fascinating. I mean, it goes all the way back to ancient antiquity, and the stuff's real. And there's a lot to add to the field of demonology if we researched it through this lens.
Oh yeah, I think, and I come into this little podcast that I have here in the universe. We walk into this door coming on that ghosts do exist. I don't want people, I don't interview people and say, so why do you think? Who are you to say that people have a spirit that exists after death, and prove it to me? I don't have to have somebody prove it to me, because I've seen it all my life. Yeah. I've seen a dead kid after a car accident, and then having been told that he actually died in the car, was completely baffled because he was healthy when I saw him with his dad. But, I've seen them. I see shadows. I've talked to them. And now in the last 15 some years, or since about 2012, when it seems that veil between us and them has thinned a bit, anybody with a digital recorder can stand in the middle of a football field and have a conversation with them. Things are changing. Things around us have changed to the point where we're being given a lot more information about life after death, and for whatever that reason is, it's interesting. Oh yeah, and we'll find out.
It's an exciting time we live in, even though it's 2020.
Yeah, it is an exciting time. It is a time where we can now come out and ask these questions out loud, and that's fascinating. And we're not looked at like we're nuts. Correct. Much.
Right. It's dependent on me.
Not like you anyway. You're crazy, but I'm not. Dude. But it's fascinating. And when your book comes out, in whenever it does, without me giving it away, you're gonna have to come back and we're gonna talk a little bit more about
I would love to. We'll get more into the molted serial killer entity that I was hinting at, which that right there is going to be explosive. Wait till you hear this. It's chilling. It's the most chilling aspect of my research that I've come across as of yet.
Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of sample too. Is that I spent 3 months doing surveillance on the largest serial killer in Canada.
Oh man, that's gonna be awesome.
I walked up behind him at a pig auction, and as I walked up behind him, I stopped about a little longer, further than arm's lengths away, because I felt like I was about to fall into a hole.
Yeah,
I just went. My stomach dropped, and I couldn't get close. And again, afterwards, I thought, oh, no, I did that. But then, again, hindsight, looking back, going, oh, okay, that's because I could feel that stuff. Yeah. Yeah, it was very interesting.
That's good.
And,
it'll be one in 10's episode, man. I can't wait till we get to that one. That's going to be amazing.
And for everybody out there, again, this is Nathaniel Gillis. Nate Gillis, you can find him at njgillis.com. He's got a link to his research there, his guest appearances, a lot more about him. Also a link to your Facebook. Are you on Instagram Instagram anymore?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, good. So he has an Instagram link there too. Nathaniel, thanks a ton for coming out. We're gonna have to do this again.
Thank you for having me, sir. It was a blast, and I'm, like I said before, I'm excited to get into that serial killer stuff, man. I'm already getting worked up for it, dude. I'm speechless. It's gonna be incredible, man. I'm so excited.
Okay, you have a good day then.
You too, brother. You have a good one.
Watching you while you sleep all alone.
All right, that's it. Let's roll. And hey. Let's be careful out there.
Far over the snow, what are those voices? They sing as they go, what are those voices? Look up for the mountain. Wake up, somebody hide, somebody better hide on through the hill, like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. We are after you, dead or alive. We are out to get you, dead or alive. And forget your don't. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after now. Run through the hill like a pack of angry wolves on the trail. Dead or alive, we are out to get you, dead or alive. If you're the one, better run away. Son, you are done. Throw your gun away. Here come the Mounties to get the man they're after. No!